Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the T.H.O. Movie Reviews podcast, the show where we bring you passionate, honest, and insightful film criticism. I'm your host, Bennett Campbell Ferguson. I'm here today to discuss a 3.5-hour movie in a podcast I'm hoping won't be 3.5 hours long, although we have been known to go on some epic journeys, haven't we, guys?
We better not. I got stuff to do today.
The voice you just heard is Shaunette, here to review with me. Mo, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm hanging in there. I'm doing my best. Same as it ever was.
Same as it ever was. I would launch into song right there, but I was just telling these guys I just had gum surgery, so I'm like, So I'm going to try not to laugh during this podcast, which is hard, but for me because I laugh a lot. But also here we have Geoff Wallace.
Hello,
Geoff. How are you?
I'm all right. Also all right. Yeah.
We're invoking McConaughey, David Byrne. I already love this.
Perfect for the Irishman.
I know.
They all relate to one another somehow.
You know, David Byrne. Have you guys seen Married to the Mob?
I have not.
No.
Okay, so Jonathan Demme directed it in the 80s. It's a gangster movie with Michelle Pfeiffer and Matthew Modine. David Byrne actually wrote the music for that. So there is actually a David Byrne mob connection, if you will.
And McConaughey is an Irish surname.
Yes, yeah. Hashtag it's all connected. So let's just get right down into it. I want to ask you guys, first of all, what you thought of the movie overall, but also what I mean, this right now this movie is, it had its exclusive theatrical run. Now it's it's in some theaters, but it's also on Netflix. Just like in addition to giving your overall opinion on the film, like say how you saw it, and how do you think for audiences seeing it on Netflix versus seeing it in a theater is going to affect the viewing experience ultimately?
I give it 4 out of 4 Martys.
I like that scale.
Yeah. It just seems like classic Scorsese doing all of his Scorsese tricks and stylistic flourishes in one very long film. That almost feels like it could have been a miniseries. I don't know. I enjoyed the film a lot, but I don't think it's grabbed me as much as other movies. So I appreciate it more for the achievement and the craft, and I don't know, less on like a personally exciting level.
Well, you said 4 out of 4 Martys.
Yeah.
So you kind of on a Scorsese scale, like as opposed to like in the context of like all your movie going scale.
Yeah. I can't really find any major faults with the movie. Mm-hmm. I guess it just didn't really like resonate with me in a deep way. But I did appreciate the movie a lot, which maybe sounds conflicting. Like maybe I sound too detached.
No. I mean,
of it.
I've had movies like that this fall, for sure, and we can get into that later. But you saw it. You saw it. In the theater, right?
I saw it in the theater. Yeah, I meant to also watch it on a laptop or a smart TV or something just to see how it compared, but I didn't get around to that. I was kind of curious if I don't know, the effects would look different or.
Well, you were, you were talking about like it almost could have been a miniseries. Like one thing that occurred to me is like for people who experience this on Netflix instead of on the big screen, you could almost like literally make it a miniseries.
Yeah.
I mean, you could watch it in 45-minute chunks if you want, which, I have no idea if that would make it better or worse, but it would be different. I mean,
I would have appreciated an intermission in the middle.
Well, because Mo, you and I saw it together.
We did.
I had to take a bathroom break. And
I also had to take a bathroom break.
It's a whole different thing. Like when you can't just pause it and you come back and you're like thrown into the midst of I mean, it was the same thing with Avengers Endgame for me, but that's another story.
Sure.
Mo, what'd you think of the movie?
I'm of a similar mind. I liked it. I will admit to being woefully inadequate in terms of my Scorsese bona fides because I have not yet seen Goodfellas. It's on my list.
I feel like I'm in so much more of a safe space now because I've always felt guilty about not having seen Goodfellas.
Not to diverge too much, but I actually recently made a FOMO movie list.
Ooh.
Just movies that I think I should watch, that I feel like I should have watched, but still haven't. So
I did that about like 9 years ago. That was a summer. that was a lot of that was when I was living in Seattle, and it was a lot of trips to Scarecrow Video,
nice,
which is still there because there's still a video rental spot somewhere in America. Anyway, I liked the movie. I liked the bleakness of it. At least, like that was cathartic for me.
I don't want to stop you too long, but I remember your exact words coming out of the theater were like, "It was bleak as hell, and I'm there for it."
Yeah.
I put that on the poster.
It's one of what, if you'll recall, you probably won't. I don't know who's listening to this. One of my favorite movies of last year.
The whole world.
One of my favorite movies of last year was American Animals, and there's kind of a similar vibe I get there because it's also a true crime movie that kind of. It very much comes down against these characters, or these real people. It doesn't glorify what they did. It's very matter of fact about it and was like, what was it all for? Whereas the difference being in American Animals, they go through all this stuff to try and make money, and then they get caught because they're idiots, because they're a bunch of 20-year-olds who don't know what they're doing and just think that, like, if they rob a library, then they can make money that way and not get caught. And then here the difference is, in The Irishman, they won, quote unquote. They actually managed to get away with, like, all of this crazy shit. And what does it get them? Where are they at the end? One of my favorite devices in it is where when they introduce characters, they'll like just do a quick screen grab of like how they died.
Yeah.
And so many of them have died in horribly violent ways.
Well, that means that some of them got away with everything, and some of them were just brutally murdered.
Yeah, but it's like.
Well, it gives you a feeling that like no one is safe.
Yeah,
no one is safe. But also like these guys, we see Harvey Keitel for the first time, and they treat him like he's this titan, like he's got like so
a demigod.
Exactly, and then
who did Harvey Keitel play?
I have the
cast list there.
Yeah, Angelo Bruno.
Oh, okay.
And I forget how they say he died. He was shot in the head like 8 times or something.
That sounds right. While sitting in his car or something.
Something like that. I'm going to look at his Wikipedia page. Oh, God.
Oh, hey.
Look at that.
For the listening audience, Mo's brought up the real life figures,
the crime scene photo of Angelo Bruno's dead body sitting in the passenger seat of his car. Killed by a shotgun blast in the back of the head as he sat in his car in front of his home at the intersection of 10th Street and Snyder Avenue in South Philadelphia.
That's a lot more detailed than the movie.
It was.
It would have been funny if like all that was just like on screen. We get Snyder Avenue.
We get the gist of it though, but stuff like that's something I can get into at least. Is that sort of catharsis of what was it all for? That's that bleakness. I tend to have trouble with bleakness unless it's got like there's actually a point to it, which sounds like an oxymoron, I'll admit.
No, but I mean there's bleakness for the sake of bleakness, like just as almost
hopelessness.
Well, yeah, or almost. I feel like from some directors, it's like kind of a like it gets to be sort of a pissing contest thing. Like who can like look at the darkest truths of humanity to prove how tough they are. And I think some directors genuinely do look at really dark truths about humanity and come up with interesting things, but some of them, I think, have no interest in what those truths actually
there
are.
A lot of needlessly bleak, like 2000s, 90s, independent European existential movies where you're just like, woo, suffering parade with no purpose, no greater lesson.
Yes, yeah.
I don't know. I feel like most bleak movies now, at least something big like The Irishman, there's a message and a purpose to the bleakness.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately.
So this is the reward for a lifetime of violence, basically. As for format changes, again, you and I, Ben, we saw it together at the Hollywood Theater. I don't know what it would be like to see it on a smaller screen. I also did not see it since then because, again, it's a 3-hour movie, man. I don't have time.
You got a life to live, dude.
3.5 hours.
3.5 hours. I gotta go to Seattle and eat turkey. We were at a point in my house when we had 5 kids under the age of 4 running around. Like no one's gonna be able to sit down and watch a Scorsese picture.
I'm just gonna pop it on.
I'm just gonna pop that on in the background.
Hey kids, watch this movie about these old men brooding about all the people they murder.
While we make sure no one runs into a wall or anything. But anyway, I imagine it would definitely be a different experience watching it on a smaller screen because it is a smaller, more intimate movie. You brought up Avengers Endgame. Like that's something you would want to watch on a bigger screen because it's grandiose, it's spectacular, it's got all this larger than life action going on. And in The Irishman, it's all smaller, it's close to home. Like there's violence in it, but it's very pared down and very simple. It's just he does a hit on someone, he just walks by, shoots him in the head, and keeps walking.
Yeah.
And that would definitely change things. And also, of course, the ability to pause and go to the bathroom. That would be very important.
I wonder if like the change is different than for a movie like Roma. Like, I mean, like first let me get this out of the way. I'm actually really glad Roma was on Netflix because a lot of people who would not have seen it saw it that way. But it seems like it's such a different thing. Like, I imagine The Irishman would play really well on a TV because so much of it is about conversation. Differently than a film like Roma, which is, so much like, we're going to have this long, wordless shot following a character walking, which kind of is such a
about a person's interior emotional sensory experience.
Sure.
And
yeah.
I actually thought maybe I could watch The Irishman on the backseat of a plane.
Don't tell Christopher Nolan.
Right. Don't tell Scorsese that either. But it didn't. I don't know. It like
no. In all seriousness, I think it could work that way in a way that a lot of movies couldn't.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I actually thought that made it more effective.
So, I mean, here's my take on the movie. I mean, thinking about this movie like made me think a lot about kind of myself and my own perspective on movies. And I think one thing that it's made me realize is that part of the reason I don't like kind of worship Scorsese as a cinematic god is when I grew up. I mean, I was really getting into movies in the aughts, and I realized in retrospect, like my ideas of about movies are really shaped by a lot of the filmmakers who are kind of rising to prominence around that time. I mean, Cuarón definitely, but also Darren Aronofsky and Christopher Nolan and Sofia Coppola. So it's like I grew up with different legends, and so like I come, even though like I really really like some of his films, I come at him with a bit more skepticism, and I don't see him as like it's necessarily on my Mount Rushmore of directors. But even if I did, I have to say I think I would be really disappointed in this film because I had a lot of issues with it, and some I want to save till later because they apply to some of the questions I'm going to bring up. But I was really disappointed in the pacing, because this movie Up the Wazoo does like something that's become a real pet peeve for me lately, like endless like montages where a character is explaining in narration, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and it's like it kind of almost feels to me like one long 3.5-hour PowerPoint. There are very few like actual like full-bodied scenes that aren't like chopped into montage form or otherwise interrupted to take some detour, and some of that I think is like, you know, kind of key to, you know, Scorsese's like natural frenetic storytelling. But for me, like there's been a change, like even in the last few years. Like for one thing, you know, I didn't like the last film he did, Silence. I thought it was awful, actually. But like it felt, it was a more patient film. It was a much more patient film, and even The Wolf of Wall Street, which just blazes through all these years and locations, like you have like amazing like long scenes. Like the first combination between DiCaprio and Kyle Chandler, like where you really get to kind of like marinate in like these long conversations, and this like or like even in that, like where like, you know, when you see a marriage dissolve, you see exactly how it dissolves. You see it dissolve in a limo with a bunch of cocaine and Margot Robbie, whereas in The Irishman it's just like Robert De Niro says in voiceover, "There's never a good time to leave your wife. I left my wife." And it's like, that's kind of a big thing to just mention, you know? But, I mean, so it didn't do it for me, personally. I mean, you know, I think there's interesting things about it. I think it's a really interesting movie to talk about, which is why I'm glad we're talking about. But I think that's where, like, that, you know, like, I disliked it so much I don't even know if I appreciated it. But I kind of get what you're saying, what you said, Jeff, about like appreciating it more than loving it.
Yeah.
Because I appreciate it for like the conversations it's been able to start, which I think have been really interesting. And God knows, I mean, working in a movie theater, I've had a hell of a lot of them, you know, over these past weeks. I mean,
well, I think I come from a similar formative movie watching experience as you, in that never really idolized Scorsese, but he's of an earlier era. Like the directors that you mentioned, they probably grew up watching his movies, whereas you grew up watching theirs. So,
yes, exactly.
I wish we'd all seen Goodfellas for the sake of the way that it's like The Irishman is almost a compare-contrast to that movie. Like the voiceover, the narration, that's very Goodfellas, but where that movie moves along with like a nihilistic glee and just sort of like, yeah, gangsters are cool, even when, you know, they're emotionally haywire or addicted to drugs or whatever. The Irishman gets into that mode for a while, particularly when De Niro's like, oh, and I started killing people, and he's just like throwing guns off the bridge over and over again. But then the movie diverges from that in, I guess, a more reflective, elegiac sort of way to say, like, no, this isn't going to be Goodfellas all over again.
Sure.
I'm not going to just have these people get away with all these heinous things without any sort of reflection.
Right.
Yeah, which I think I was talking to you about Paul Schrader.
In First Reformed.
Taxi Driver and First Reformed. It's kind of or maybe even David Lynch and Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks Season 3, The Return. All 6 of these different films and shows have creators coming back to their creation. Right. And I think reassessing how these characters live.
Sure.
And like the choices that they would make. Like Taxi Driver, there's a disgruntled man who wants to change the world, and he does it with violence, whereas Paul Schrader comes back 40 years later, whatever, makes First Reformed. There's a disgruntled middle-aged man who wants to change the world and initially chooses violence, but then relents.
Yes.
I don't know. Maybe that's just a trend among filmmakers as they age. They want to look back, reflect on things that they've made, how they would make them differently.
Well, it seems like part of this instinct to kind of like revisit like
your successes and
but and like maybe reappraise them as well, because I mean I feel like you see all directors of consequence, like you see them age through their work, and you can tell like a young person's movie like from an older person's movie, like sure. I feel like invariably if you look at like a director's first film, usually like the first thing they make is something super is really like designed to provoke, like almost like they're trying to like shock their elders. Like I mean,
they're looking for attention.
Yeah, like I mean, like you look at like
which I mean, all artists are, but like, specifically.
No, absolutely. I mean, like you look at like like Following, which of course was Nolan's first film. And that movie, like, the premise is, like, look at this stupid little writer. He got fucked over because he was so stupid. That's what happens when you're stupid. And then, but then, like, even just, like, a couple of years later with Memento, suddenly it's this more complicated thing of, oh, look at the tragedy of, this guy who deceived himself. And you're repulsed by him, and yet you care about him. And I feel like it's kind of... Like, I don't know, maybe Scorsese is doing this as well, like moving a bit away from shock and into, like, that kind of reflective, wistful mode.
There's, moving away from shock, there's very little visceral violence in The Irishman.
Sure.
As opposed to, like, so many of his other movies. I don't know, the Goodfellas opens with them beating and murdering some guy in the trunk of a car, and I think... he had to cut that scene, otherwise it would have gotten an NC-17 rating because it was considered so violent at the time. Aronofsky is another example. I think his first couple movies were like so intense, so
absolutely,
tough. And, although he's still made some pretty crazy things in recent years, but more restrained at least.
Yeah. Well, we of course, in 2017 survived many discussions about Mother. But even that, like, is harsh as that movie is, it's still coming from like kind of this perspective of like he's trying to do good. He's trying to like provoke people into acting on climate change, or at least that's one of many takes. That was my take. That was my interpretation.
I'm trying to go into the mind of like directors who I've seen who have been around a while, but who I've also seen a lot of their work, and there's very little in that. Like I have something of an eclectic taste, so I'd see a bunch of different stuff. The one that comes to mind for me at least is Tarantino, because you look at Reservoir Dogs. You got the famous scene where it's, stuck in the middle with you. It's Michael Madsen cutting off a dude's ear. And then you cut ahead to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. There's violence in it, most definitely, but it's most of the movie is just very calm. It's steady. It's just the life of these three people in Hollywood in this time. And there's still very much that connection, but it's also... You could look at it and say, like, what is the violence about there? And is it just self-indulgent, or is it... It's definitely self-indulgent, but is it also...
It's Tarantino, I mean.
Yeah. It's... Oh, wait, I'm not gonna spoil it.
I haven't seen it, so...
Okay.
Yeah, save the spoilers.
But it's... It feels more purposeful, at least. It's not just... there to show off, which is definitely a feature in a lot of his movies.
Well, it's such a it's I feel like the ultimate like middle-aged man movie. Like it's very like the pacing is much slower, and also there's like it's mourning for a time lost. Yeah. It's mourning for like him mourning for something he can never get back. Like in either maybe that's coming from his experiences since he was actually a child at the time the movie's depicting. Maybe some of it's like I think a lot of it's colored by nostalgia as well. But either way, it's like it's an older person like kind of reaching for something that's gone, and Scorsese's kind of doing that too, I think, because he's revisiting like the genre he's known for, and yet he can't quite do it the same way.
Yeah,
it's
and that genre doesn't really exist in the same way anymore either.
I think that's true. Yeah, I want to talk about the notorious, some would say infamous, de-aging effects. It's really interesting. Like honestly, so I mean, part of the reason, of course, for any of our listeners who don't know that this movie went to Netflix was because they were the only studio that would give Scorsese the budget to de-age Robert De Niro so he could play the same character over a period of decades and play the character as a young man. But it's been really interesting talking about this because for me personally, it really bugged me. It was super distracting. But I know for some people it's not an issue at all. It didn't really affect them. And so I just wanted to hear you guys' thoughts on it because it's definitely something everyone notices. Yeah. But it hasn't struck everybody the same way.
I didn't notice it too much. I'd say it worked for me. It was subtle enough that I could tell at least that they were supposed to be different ages. I didn't necessarily buy it because I know there's when he goes to fix Joe Pesci's truck, and that's the first time they met. He's supposed to be 20, I guess, or something like that.
And yo, how you doing, kid?
Yeah, he still looks like he's a 74-year-old man.
Yes, yeah.
But it worked for me. I was okay with it. That's yeah.
Yeah. I felt similar. Initially, I was really impressed by it, and then as time went on, I started to notice a few scenes that looked a little unreal. That sort of glowy, fuzzy. I don't remember what causes that, but then I started to second guess, and I was like, "Oh, is it good? Is it actually only good in some scenes?" And I don't know if you guys watch any of the YouTube channels that focus on computer-generated imagery and Corridor Digital. Those guys, they've done deep fakes with different actors and robots and whatever. And I don't know, one thing that they talk about in getting fake faces to look real is you should limit the lighting that you have, which is one reason why the T-Rex in Jurassic Park looks good, because it's only
the shadow.
Yeah, the shadow and lighting.
The immensity.
And I noticed that it seemed like they were choosing to just give the de-aged faces one light source a lot of the time. But when they were in natural light outside, or when there were lots of different light sources, it kind of fell apart.
Well, in the war scene, they filmed in a wide shot,
right?
And they've got the helmet.
I forgot there was a war scene.
Well, there's a lot of scenes. You can't remember them all.
Movie, man.
I just told myself that it isn't that much different from if they were just wearing makeup, like a fat suit or something, and that was enough to suspend my disbelief for most of the movie.
So here's what really bugged me about the whole thing.
Sure.
I mean, first of all, I think, there are certain things that look really unreal and are really distracting. I mean, part of that's the kind of the eerie smoothness of his features, but even just seeing present day Robert De Niro, but he's got jet black hair, is kind of distracting, and then certainly some of his movements, it's really kind of unbelievable watching him
they're the movements
kick
of an
a dude,
old man,
and it's and the dude's writhing around on the ground, and it's I don't know, that kick doesn't look like it would hurt that much, but I think it's also a thematic issue for me, because this movie is so much about aging and loss, and it almost, for me, at the end became hard to take the scenes where he's really old and decrepit seriously, because it's he kind of looked like an old man the whole time. I don't feel he's really. I didn't really feel the scope of his change, and I don't know. I mean, a great performance. I think at the risk of stating the obvious, I mean, is De Niro in The Godfather Part 2 playing a younger Marlon Brando. Yeah. I really wish they could have found someone to do for De Niro what De Niro did for Brando, and I think it would have been interesting to give like a young actor that opportunity. And even though I think it can take you out of the movie, when you're changing actors, and that's why you have stuff like this, or Richard Linklater doing his crazy experiment with Boyfriend, and now with the Stephen Sondheim movie he's doing as well. I mean, I think but I think when you do it right, you can get actors perfectly in sync. De Niro was just gotten Brando's voice so perfect, but even more recently, I mean, one of the most amazing feats to me is in Moonlight, that you had three different actors of such different ages who were so almost eerily in sync with each other's mannerisms. It's amazing that a really, really young kid and Trevante Rhodes could seem like mirror images of each other. I wish they'd done something like this with that. With
it's so weird. I'm going to talk nice things about Moonlight just because I love that movie. It is weird just because the actors are so different.
Yeah, because they don't. It isn't that they don't look. I mean, they have very different.
They have similar skin tone. They have similar eyes, but that's kind of it.
Yeah, they have different face shape and stuff.
But that's part of the point. At least in the transition from Part 2 to Part 3 of that movie, is just that he changes so much between them, and yet there's still that through line that you have to be able to recognize. I love that movie.
Yeah. Yes. So good. Yeah.
But I think what Mo's getting at is that you can do the casting in a way that actually reflects the character choices that adds richness to the character's development, even if you pick, say, actors who are physiologically different. Trevante Rhodes is pretty jacked.
Yeah.
And then the end
he was
of the movie,
a former track runner or something.
Okay, yeah, but the second age of that character, he's super lean.
Yeah,
real skinny.
Yeah,
it's somewhere along the way he got swole.
Well, and that makes sense because clearly, by the time we meet him as Trevante Rhodes, he's been through a lot.
Yeah.
So exactly. I mean,
whereas you can't really say the same with The Irishman.
Yeah,
not so much. I think. Yeah.
The other example that comes to mind is Looper.
See that was one I know a lot of people that really did not work for me. I thought Joseph Gordon-Levitt's makeup was just awful. He looked like he was on Botox or something, his weird stiff Bruce Willis lips. Sorry, you were good.
For me at least, that he looked enough like Bruce Willis that I could groove with it. It would be interesting to see them do something like that here, but maybe just because it's Robert De Niro, because he's such an icon of film and this genre of film specifically, that the idea of someone playing a younger version of him would just be distracting.
Yeah,
I feel like for me it would be less distracting than seeing this weird amalgamation of old and young. You know,
he's he's so distinct looking too. I mean,
it's true. Yeah,
he came from an era of Hollywood when you could be kind of ugly, and not that he was really that ugly, but.
I like to call The Irishman Lumpy Old White Men, the movie.
Kind of is, yeah.
That's a better title, honestly. That's it's more memorable. It's more honest. It's more honest. I mean, let's face it, you see that on Netflix, are you going to click on that or are you going to click on The Irishman? You know what I mean? I get what you guys are saying, though. I mean, you make valid points, both. Let's see. So I was gonna ask a different question, but I'm gonna throw you guys another one. I was talking with a friend of mine.
Okay.
And he was he was really kind of fixated on the union aspect of the movie.
Yeah, it's a pretty central part of the plot.
Yeah. And he wanted there to be more specifics about the union stuff, and I didn't have that reaction myself. So like I don't even know why I'm asking this, or if it's even like worth talking about. But it popped in my head. I mean, what did you guys think of like the idea of like unions playing such a central role? Because it's like it seems like there's this moral ambiguity there. Because it's like Hoffa almost like, at least the Pacino version, like it doesn't seem, it almost seems like the union is like more his vehicle than his cause. You know, like it's hard to tell where like the wanting to help, you know, the workers begins and the just wanting to be
powerful
a leader ends. Yeah. You know, like
I kind of read it as both.
Okay.
I should mention, we saw this movie a few weeks ago, and it's not super fresh in my mind. I probably should have watched it again, but again, it's
3.5 hours.
It's 3.5 hours, man. I am not a busy man, but I am also not an attentive one. So it definitely smacked of both. It smacked of them paying Jimmy Hoffa like kind of an egomaniac, which I could definitely see, like someone who has that much charisma and that much presence definitely has kind of like some megalomania going on. So I bought that, but I also think that at some degree he was genuine in his beliefs. Like there's the line where it's you can never trust millionaires' kids, and I have to imagine he actually believes that. Like he actually,
I believe that.
That said, I mean he's talking about JFK, and it's like, okay, but you donated to Nixon's campaign to fight him, so not exactly the best.
Sure. Yes.
So it's, I think that it's definitely when it started out. I feel like that's his transformation. Is that when it started out, he did want to do good things with the union, but after he got out of prison, it was all about reclaiming his power and reclaiming his status, and everything else was secondary.
I mean, one thing that like was odd to me, and it's interesting to me, is the idea that like, you know, he's saying all that stuff about like, you know, Hoffa's saying all that stuff about, you know, cracking down on corruption, you know, and the mob takes that seriously. And, you know, basically that's the reason they want to, you know, assassinate him. But, like, the funny thing is I never got the feeling Hoffa was really serious. Like, I got the feeling it was bluster that the mob took seriously, or that Russell Buffalino takes seriously. I don't know, I feel like it kind of speaks to who these characters are, that, you know, the main killing in the movie basically happens, you know, over a misunderstanding, over an ability to have a conversation. And I have to think that must have been, you know, a deliberate thing they wanted to explore. I mean,
I could see it that way too. That's a valid interpretation.
It does seem like the union is kind of a parallel, more legitimized mafia in a lot of ways. Like there's a lot of, you know, greasing of palms and conducting shady business, but it's somehow legitimized by it being for the people, or you know, like it's putting food on the table and people buy houses and retire, and
we're
all
protecting the working man.
Exactly.
Right.
So there's this ideology that protects it and makes it, you know, a force of good, supposedly, but Hoffa is just kind of fenced in by those same delusions that the gangsters have about their power and their agency and their status and their names. Like, oh, you can't insult me, whatever. But yeah, it does. All of those characters, if there's one thread they share in common, other than wanting to swing their dicks around, and is the biggest, is that they can't communicate with each other.
Yes.
And you could almost, like, watch the movie as failure of male communication, just like a laundry list of all the ways that men don't communicate with each other.
Yeah.
Which almost, I think, touches on one of your other questions about Anna Paquin's character.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, before we get to that,
Yeah, sure.
I mean, has anyone else felt like this has been like a really interesting year for like movies examining masculinity? Because I feel like there's so many. You know, I mean, you just brought up some really good stuff, but there's so many like different like attempts to either like explore masculinity in a new light or create like a more like progressive, you know, vision of like what masculinity should be like. I find it kind of funny. Like, you know, the two movies I saw this season, Knives Out and Motherless Brooklyn, are both like kind of these, you know, hard-boiled mysteries, but where the male, you know, detective is almost like the embodiment of like the kind of emotionally developed man, like who's, you know, in touch with his feelings and you know, is like kind of like has these high moral standards, but doesn't like enforce them in like kind of like a bludgeoning way. And then like kind of interesting with the Irishman, that's like, you know, showing like the cost of like the other path.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm just thinking before we started this podcast, we were catching up. One of the movies we had both seen was A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood.
Yes,
which
thank
is
you.
very
Yes.
much a movie about how to deal with your feelings. Like,
Yes,
that's absolutely
yeah.
the text. And I'm just imagining Mr. Rogers trying to teach these guys how to be angry in constructive ways. You can play
Oh
all
God,
the
I want to
lowest.
see that movie.
You can play all the lowest keys on a keyboard. Bong.
Isn't that kind of how Analyze This? Isn't that sort of the premise of that movie?
Was that also The Sopranos? Because like the through line is him going to therapy.
That's
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
That's true.
That's definitely. This feels like something that was always there in terms of like crime stories, but really feels like the pendulum is swinging the other way, where we're not glorifying them as much. It's not. It's, you know, I have watched Breaking Bad a lot of times, and I am absolutely at the point. I watched El Camino, and it starts off with like a recap of Breaking Bad, and when you look at the whole journey from the end, knowing everything that happens, is like, oh my God, Walter was such a dick. There's the line, I'm not in the money business, I'm in the empire business, and it's like, you're here to stroke your ego, and people are dying. And it's so Again, I feel like thanks to stuff like the Hays Code or whatever, there was always kind of swinging the other way in terms of how we paint criminality and show criminals.
Well, even in The Departed, you know, which is another Scorsese gangster movie.
Since I saw that movie.
But that movie like basically ends with like, you know, Mark Wahlberg shooting Matt Damon. It's like, you know, sort of a fuck yeah, you're dead, bro moment.
Yeah.
You know? And I mean, like, it's so, and kind of like, you know, like the movie's like getting off to like vengeance and
Right.
toughness. And I mean, that it's a whole different thing. Like, I mean, like, for me personally, like, I don't know how like successfully like The Irishman, you know, pivots to the other side. I mean, I think, you know, it struggles to do that persuasively to a certain degree, but there's definitely been a transformation. And that's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean,
And not a lot of Scorsese movies really have like a character transformation or character arc, or a lot of times it's just some broken man living his broken life, and maybe he changes something, but usually he doesn't change.
sure.
Like Taxi Driver is even sort of he just loops right back to where he was at the beginning of the film. Shutter Island, he's kind of stuck in a psychological loop vortex. Yeah, I don't know how well it really expresses his remorse or lack thereof in The Irishman. He almost seemed kind of sociopathic, but didn't really know it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, going on to the Anna Paquin question, I mean, of course, one of the big controversies is that, you know, Anna Paquin plays De Niro's daughter in this, and doesn't speak for quite a while into the movie, and is just this silent presence, basically. And I mean, there's the debate, I think, you know, or the, I mean, you can argue in two ways. You can argue that that's just to show like how little interest, these gangsters like have for the women in their life, like they, we don't hear them speak because these guys aren't listening. On the other hand, it's like, well, you got Anna Paquin there, who's this, incredible Academy Award winning actress. Not only is it a bit weird having her basically doing Jack,
she's staring in judgment. That is her character.
Yeah, and it seems like kind of like there's an argument that it's kind of insulting too, and that you could have had an even richer tapestry if she was shown as a full human being, like who actually had if not a relationship toward him, a perspective that was expressed more than as you well put it, staring in judgment. I mean,
I understand it, but I'm not going to defend it because I understand that what the movie is about is Frank Sheeran's relationship to this lifestyle, this mobster lifestyle, and what it meant to him, what it cost him, and how it's his investment in it ruined all of his personal relationships, most notably with his daughter, who was unable to forgive him for killing Hoffa. And it's him more or less ignoring her for most of the movie, ignoring her staring at him in judgment, makes sense because it's, at least for us, the audience, we recognize, oh, we know where this is going. The signs were there. This is how it ends. This is what it cost him. He could have seen that. Frank Sheeran could have seen that coming, but he doesn't because he's so focused on everything surrounding Hoffa and the mob. That said, I agree. It's kind of it's not the best use of a very talented actress. I do think it speaks to. It might speak to something to the fact that Hollywood still has issues with women in general. I do think we've gotten better, but I say we. I do think they've gotten better, but there's still a ways to go.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I also felt like it was a waste of a talented actress. It was like, I even found myself wondering if she was going to speak at all. And
yes.
that's a weird thing to think about in a dramatic film. I don't know, maybe if it was a horror movie or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was listening to the film comment podcast on The Irishman, and one of the commenters said that Scorsese doesn't really do romantic relationships or male-female relationships. He's more focused on male homosocial relationships. And there are some examples to the contrary, I think.
Alice doesn't live here anymore. I mean, for one.
Sure, or Age of Innocence.
Sure.
Or,
Hugo, maybe?
Yeah, Hugo.
You have a boy and a girl like being kind of the focus of that, yeah.
But this movie was very much like classic Scorsese male relationships, and it just, I don't know, it seemed like it didn't have room for the women, or it just viewed them the way the mobsters viewed them, which is as sort of something to be on your arm, to appreciate when you're not busily plotting, the deaths of other people. But I think it would have been more engaging if they had made the female characters have more of a presence.
Yeah. I mean, like, what do you think of, when you think of, The Wolf of Wall Street, you don't just think of DiCaprio, you think of Margot Robbie.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, she's such a presence in that movie.
She is, and I think, having the... I mean, for one thing, that was a really complex character. I mean, there are certainly kind of despicable aspects of the character, but then there are moments when you are so completely with her, and to get that kind of ambiguity is that in a woman in a big Hollywood movie was exciting, and I think it could have been really exciting in this, because like I thought that was really interesting, like that, you know, as a little girl, the daughter like kind of abhors Russell Buffalino, but you know, like sees Jimmy Hoffa like maybe is like the father she wished she had,
right?
And the idea of like, you know, like kind of the notion that he is good, like somehow, you know, captures her imagination more, and like that gave me a little bit of a window into her perspective. And I wish there was more later on, because again, and kind of with the de-aging thing, it's like you really need to feel like the loss, like when, you know, these women are out of his life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so hard to feel that loss when they barely get a chance to get a word in edgewise.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's tricky.
Well, if I'm being generous, maybe you could read it as tapping into the sentimentality of the gangster archetype.
Mm-hmm.
Like, gangsters are always pretty brutal, but they always have some sort of emotional weakness that
Sure.
is usually like underdeveloped, like they're children emotionally in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It might make more sense that the only women they can relate to are children.
Sure.
Are their kids, which is why De Niro is so like fixated on getting back in touch with his daughter.
Yes.
But he doesn't even really know why he wants to, because he's so emotionally stunted.
Sure.
But yeah, that still doesn't give a lot of room.
Well, I got one final thing I wanted to discuss with you guys. And we're about to be totally cliche and talk about Scorsese and Marvel, but you know, but despite the fact that this whole debate has been, in my opinion, a tiresome dumpster fire, it does open the door to have more interesting conversations. So I wanted to ask you guys, I mean, just to recap, basically what he said was, he was doing an interview with Empire. He basically said like I don't care for Marvel films. They're not cinema to me. Then, you know, the takes and the tweets started.
The knives came out.
The knives came out, if you will. And then he articulated in a much like, more extensive fashion his feelings in the New York Times, although I don't know how much that editorial really articulated. I don't know that it like said much more anything more than what he said in those couple sentences he said to Empire. I read the whole thing and I didn't think it was that revolutionary necessarily. I mean, but to me, look, this, I mean, for one thing, this is weird. I mean, because there's a lot going on here. Because first of all, you know, like, who cares what he thinks of superhero movies?
Yeah.
He doesn't make superhero movies. I think I can safely assume he doesn't read comic books either. So, like he's not an authority on it. So for another thing, like, it is a bit weird that like there's so much anger that it's like that, you know, a lot of us feel. I mean, honestly, what he said made me kind of angry. It's weird that like me and a lot of other people feel that like we almost need his approval, which is, you know, makes no sense and yet is a very real thing. And then on top of all that, I mean, what he was saying was really just the kind of same vague diatribes, you know, that people are always, you know, leveling at big budget movies. Like it's the same kind of thing they would have said back in the 70s. Oh, Star Wars and Jaws are, you know, destroying cinema. You know, well, you know, as we found out, spoiler alert, cinema did not, you know, get destroyed. We were just talking about Moonlight. You know, you know, movie. You know, the continued flourishing of art film is, you know, evidence that, you know, we aren't living in some blockbuster dystopia, and that, you know, the Moonlights of the world can coexist alongside the Avengers of the world. So, I mean, taking all that into account, I mean, why do you guys think this struck such a nerve? Because it's not like no one ever criticizes, you know, big budget movies. Like,
right. What
is it about this that, you know, really set people off?
Two things, I think, at least. It's Actually, no. It's really just one thing in two different ways. It's that people are kind of two minds of this, because I'll put this on Front Street, and I think people are already well aware of this. I love the Marvel movies. I love all of that, all the cinematic universe, all of their not all of their spin-offs, most of their spin-offs. I couldn't get past like episode 2 of Inhumans, man. There's only so much I can take. But I really do like those movies, and something I appreciate about them is that they're willing to play with genre. Like, you can do a superhero movie, but you can also make it, say, a space opera with a soundtrack of 70s dad rock that's also about how you deal with surviving abusive childhoods and creating a new family. And that's interesting to me. You can't... That's something I wouldn't expect from a blockbuster movie. So I think a lot of people agree with that sentiment, that there's a lot more to Marvel movies than just spectacle, that there's actually hearts and brains behind them. But also, Martin Scorsese is something of an authority. He may not be my film god, but he is a film god, I would say. He's done some spectacular work. I love a lot of his movies. I still love... Like, I'll go back and watch The Wolf of Wall Street every so often. It's another
great movie.
It's another 3-hour movie. Right. But it's a really good movie.
It's a really fast 3 hours.
Yeah. It's like you're on drugs.
Yeah.
But I do want to ask like one thing, because I think you bring up some really interesting things. Like I mean, like that he is an important voice, in the movie world is unquestionable.
Yeah.
I mean, that comes from, what he's achieved, from the fact that he, is, one of sort of one of the elder statesmen of Hollywood, if you will.
Oh, yeah.
But it's interesting, like, I mean, I guess what I'm, like, struggling with is, like, for instance, like, I remember an interview where J.J. Abrams was talking about Terrence Malick, and, talking about how he really likes Terrence Malick. But, no one, like, asked him about that. He just kind of volunteered that information, and even though, like, he did, like, I didn't necessarily think that, J.J. Abrams was the guy to be analyzing Terrence Malick. I mean, the Scorsese, like, thing kind of flips it the other way. Like, is he the best person to weigh on this kind of thing? Because I can't even... I'm not even clear that he knows the difference between, like, a Marvel Cinematic Universe film and a film just based on a Marvel comic. Like, he just kind of says, like, Marvel indiscriminately. And I can't even tell that he's even watched these movies. He said, I tried. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean...
Which one did you try?
Did he watch half of Thor: The Dark World and then turn it off,
I mean, that's understandable.
I agree, but it's like... I don't... It seems like he's being a bit reactionary to me.
Part of me gets where he is coming from, just because with big budget movies like this, where the budget is in the hundreds of millions of dollars, an insane amount of money by any stretch, they're definitely designed to be as low risk as possible.
Sure.
And I get that, but there's still room for creativity in there. There's still room for unique voices, for something new and different. I will beat this dead horse as long as I can, but Black Panther is a goddamn revolution.
I agree.
You will never before have we seen Afrofuturism depicted with that much money, with that much forethought in a mainstream film.
Yeah.
Like, that's incredible. So to some degree I do get what he's saying. There's definitely bigger issues going on with big budget cinema. We were also talking about this earlier. Weren't a lot of summer blockbusters that were really interesting or like different or fun, I guess, that at least for me.
Men in Black International Revolution never quite arrived.
Yeah. But there's a conversation to be had maybe about like the monopolization of the film industry, of Disney's growing power. I say this as a subscriber of Disney Plus, so I am part of the problem. But that seems to be more where the conversation should go, as opposed to like what is the quality of the product in general, because that is purely subjective.
Yes,
and you can argue until you're blue in the face, but there's not a lot you can do about that. It's if people have made their decision, it's tough to sway them from it.
Sure.
So ultimately, I guess my thesis is I disagree with him, but I don't care enough to argue.
Well, I want to hear your thoughts in a sec, Jeff. But
Sure.
I think one thing that why like this struck a nerve with me is because I mean definitely I see basically all superhero movies because I'm a nerd, but and proud of it, I might add. But but I do strongly dislike a lot of them, and even the ones I do like, I sometimes have really serious issues with. Like, for instance, I really liked Avengers Endgame, and liked it a lot more than I expected, since I thought Infinity War was frankly terrible. But at the same time, as much as I think that Endgame is like a really moving and exciting film that and really kind of just invigorating in terms of sheer scale. I mean, like it does bug me. Like how like so much of the movie was designed to set up these Disney Plus shows.
Oh yeah,
and like it's kind of like oh, that whole thing with that whole emotional moment with like Falcon and Winter Soldier. Then like, oh, that was just to set up another product. Oh, yeah. That's kind of a bummer. And like even though that's a well played scene, it's like, so I guess like, but at the same time. Like I know when Scorsese, talks about, superhero movies, he's not just talking about that. He's talking about the genre as a whole, and I'm sure he wouldn't just say that like about a Marvel Cinematic Universe film. Like I'm guessing that he would like kind of include other superhero films in that category. Like I would not be surprised if he also did not like The Dark Knight, for instance, if he saw that as like kind of like a fake cartoon crime movie or something, and I certainly couldn't agree with that. I mean, maybe I'm putting words in his mouth, but I don't know. I feel like like this. There's got to be more room for a nuanced discussion, because it's like, I mean, for every like every Aquaman that's pretty to look at but like emotionally underdeveloped, there is a Black Panther or a Wonder Woman or a Captain Marvel, which I think is a flawed movie that nonetheless like has a really interesting allegory, like with this kind of alien refugee crisis where who you think the villains are is not who they actually are. And I think as much as like there's the genre can exemplify the worst of Hollywood, I think it can also exemplify the best. And like I wish Scorsese would like do his homework before like taking the trouble of like writing a whole New York Times article about this. Like it's just kind of like, it's like if you're going to be a film scholar, like be scholarly about everything you can, especially if you're going to like die on that hill. I mean,
I think I pretty much share a lot of the sentiments both of you guys have expressed, but what you just said, Ben, about film scholar, it does make me think that Scorsese is approaching it very much from the position of like some old film professor who's stuck in some kind of ivory tower, and they can make good and I think rational points that they, like I don't think he meant to, for what he said, to become such a big deal.
No, yeah.
And I don't even know if it's really that controversial. I didn't wade into any of the responses or whatever, but I do think that it is just sort of like old guy kind of stuck in an older way of thinking and not really, I don't know, considering like avenues that a movie like Black Panther can open up, or even just approaching it from a more technical aspect, like some of the stunt work in, I don't know, Thor Ragnarok or Black Panther again, like, is pretty awesome. And he's not really a director who does stunts, so that's not going to seem like cinema to him. Or,
Sure.
I was just thinking about how much work it must have taken to write Infinity War and Endgame. I mean, that's like a 6-hour movie, you know?
I mean, can you imagine the whiteboard?
Yeah.
I'd like to see that whiteboard, actually.
You know, maybe he just thinks that they're just like craftsmen in that situation. But again, I'd be putting words in his mouth. I don't really know.
I know one of the more common criticisms of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is that they do feel like cinema by assembly line. There's not a rigid structure, but there is a structure, a certain plot beats that are very much stuck to, that are repeated, and yeah, that's a valid criticism.
Yeah.
Like George Lucas talking about the Star Wars movies and saying that they're like stanzas in a poem, and that sometimes the stanzas repeat.
It's like poetry. They rhyme.
Yeah. You're like, well, but sometimes you're just remaking the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, no kidding.
And maybe that's part of how Scorsese views the movies. But again, like, is he watching Logan? Is he watching Dark Phoenix? You know?
Yeah. I mean, those are very different conversations, to say the least. I guess, like, what it all comes down to is not cinema are two very strong words to throw around.
Yeah.
What that opens up, what are we talking about when we say cinema? And I do not have the energy or the interest to dive into that.
Right.
Well, and so you which is why you might like what I have to say about this. Like, is it not? Is like kind of trying to come up with like a single definition of what cinema is, even a worthy goal? Because it is by nature an ever mutating thing. Mm-hmm. You know, like I've been watching a lot of Charlie Chaplin movies lately, and he said very clearly, movies are you know, a pantomimic art, you know, and he was right for him, because that was the right way for him to make movies, and he did you know comedic pantomime, you know. I mean, he was one of the masters of that. But he was right for himself. He wasn't right for everybody. You know, right. Cinema evolved, and there are other movies that you could only make with sound. You know, movies that, you know, are, you know, obviously, you know, comprise most of our favorites.
Right.
You know, I mean, I think what it comes down to is like it's all so subjective, and that's why I have trouble with Scorsese saying like a certain kind of movie. All those movies are not cinema. Because, you know, like, who is he to decide? Like I don't watch like very many horror movies. Like to be honest, like I don't really like being scared. Should I therefore say that horror is not cinema? I mean, I'm just one guy, and I have a lot of friends who really like horror, and, you know, like have, you know, talked to me, you know, said really interesting things about, like, you know, like what they got out of Hereditary, you know, or, you know, Rosemary's Baby or something. And, you know, that's cool that they had that experience, even if that, you know, my experience was just, you know, like wanting to curl up in a ball and whimper, you know. I mean,
I think you're tapping into something that's happened with every medium, and then various genres within various media. Like, yeah, for a long time, sci-fi, horror, whatever, any kind of more genre, air quotes, would be looked down upon as being not true drama, or not, you know, just like for kids. But then you get 2001, you get something like Rosemary's Baby, and you're like, no, these different genres are equally as viable means of conveying a serious, dramatic experience, talking about the human condition. I don't know if we're quite there with the superhero movies, but it only seems like a matter of time before there's a 2001 of superhero movies. Or maybe it's Black Panther. Maybe it's
Logan.
Logan, yeah.
Sure.
The Dark Knight.
Yes.
Any of those Oscar-nominated movies.
Yeah.
But like you said with Chaplin and his comment and it being right for him, I think what Scorsese said is also right for him.
Sure.
And you can even see that when you watch The Irishman. You can, like, I was struck by one scene where they're driving in a car, and it looks like they're driving in a car that's on a flatbed. Mm-hmm. You know, you're like, it doesn't look very natural, but it also looks like the way that you would have shot that scene if you were making a movie in the 70s or the 80s.
Sure,
and,
yeah.
I don't... And it's funny, too, because he has been a forward-thinking director in some avenues, like the de-aging tech, or what he did
or doing
with Hugo.
3D.
Yeah.
With Hugo, or mixing... I mean, with the Wall Street, he was mixing digital and film.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. I don't... I did want to add, maybe as a final point, Bong Joon-ho's response.
I think I saw that. What did he say?
I saw it, but I don't remember what it was.
Yeah, okay, so there are two things that I wanted to say. One to read. One is his response to the Scorsese comment, but then also, much funnier, is his explanation why he'll never do a Marvel movie. So first he said that he has a lot of respect for Scorsese and Coppola and directors like that, and he grew up studying their films and he fully understands the context of their comments and respects their opinion. But on the other hand, like when he looks at the films individually, like Guardians of the Galaxy or Logan or Winter Soldier, that there are great cinematic moments in those movies and he enjoyed them immensely. So I think he's saying that he can't say that's not cinema.
That's such a thoughtful take,
right?
On this whole thing, like that. I think that, I mean, that's a genuinely like impressive way of looking at it, like kind of like acknowledging the wisdom of the elder statespeople, but at the same time, you know, like expanding the tent as well.
I think there's definitely a problem with a lot of discourse. This is going to sound pretentious and stupid, but also true. That a lot of discourse, there's very much this all or nothing attitude. That if you find a fault in something, then that means that you hate it entirely, and otherwise you have to love it unconditionally with no stipulations.
That didn't sound pretentious. That's just true. That's very much the state of discourse.
Of our,
and that's something it bugs the crap out of me, and I really hope we are able to move past it.
I agree.
To just toward a more inclusive cinema.
Yeah.
Instead of a rejective, black and white, like it's either good or bad. It can only be this thing, that thing.
Yeah.
It should be all things.
I think that's such a great point. Shall we end there?
Sure.
On an inclusive note?
What was the other thing?
I'll read the
because this I kind of remember, and it was good.
So he was interviewing with Variety, and they asked him if he would ever direct a Marvel movie, and his response was, "I have a personal problem. I respect the creativity that goes into superhero films, but in real life and in movies, I can't stand people wearing tight-fitting clothes. I'll never wear something like that, and just seeing someone in tight clothes is mentally difficult. I don't know where to look, and I feel suffocated. Most superheroes wear tight suits, so I can never direct one. I don't think anyone will offer the project to me either. If there is a superhero movie, if there is a superhero who has a very boxy costume, maybe I can try."
I don't know, maybe he should have been on Logan. Just get that trench coat going on. Or no, it was a sport coat. I think it was a sport coat, but
something like that.
Yeah. It did make me think of a really funny fake article I saw, like kind of satirizing this whole thing. The headline was Terrence Malick says Marvel films are bitchin', particularly Thor. You know, so
there was one where it was I forget exactly the wording, but it was like the ghost of Orson Welles rises up to say he didn't care for Thor or something like that.
Or even Ben Stiller was interviewing Noah Baumbach about Marriage Story, and like in the middle of the interview, he abruptly says, "Now, what do you think about Marvel films?" Just kidding. Which is like, yeah, I like that. All right, You guys have any final thoughts before we cut it off?
Go see Parasite. Parasite was really good.
Yeah.
Go see Parasite.
3 votes for Parasite.
But but if you go to Cinema 21, where I work, be extra nice to the guy serving the popcorn, because, it might be me.
Well, always be extra nice to the guy serving the popcorn.
In general, yes.
I've been that guy. It's not a great time.
All right, well, if you like this podcast, please click thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at T.H.O Movie Reviews. And please check out all the great reviews and content we have at thomoviereviews.wordpress.com. I'm your host, Bennett Campbell Ferguson. I'm here with Shaunette and Geoff Wallace. And hey, that was an hour and 15 minutes, not 3.5 hours,
We were concise?
We were...
Question mark?
We were like... We got the edge on Scorsese.